Good afternoon, and thank you everyone for attending today's webinar, Reduce Patient Appointment No-Shows, brought to you by Paul Jenny of Eastern Datacom. Please be aware that there will be a question-and-answer portion today at the end of the webinar. To avoid frequent interruptions during the webinar, please type your questions in the question box located on the right of your screen. They will be answered in order received during the question-and-answer portion. Additionally, an electronic version of this presentation will be emailed to all participants following completion of today's webinar, and a recorded version will be available on the website for members only. Again, NJM GMA would like to thank you for attending, and I will now turn things over to Paul.
Thank you very much, Dawn, and good afternoon, everybody. My name is Paul Jenny. I'm the sales manager for Eastern Datacom, and I want to thank you for joining me for our webinar here today. So just to give you a little bit of introduction of who Eastern Datacom is, we are a technology and communications company. We've been in business since 1988, so we're actually currently in our 29th year of business. And we've been selling voice over IP phone systems and unified communication solutions since about 2003. And we deployed a lot of these types of systems in unified communications to a number of medical practices, really helping them improve productivity as well as saving money. So now it's a little bit about me. I'll jump right into the presentation for you today. So before we begin, I want to kind of go over a little bit what the agenda is. So as we start talking about unified communications and how it can reduce patient no-shows and really improve your practice, I'll start off by just kind of going over what unified communications is for those of you who may not know what that means. And then we'll go into outbound patient notification and reaching out to your patients and really to how to improve that communication with your patients. We'll be talking then about mobility. That's one of key features of unified communications that many medical practices are taking advantage of and that really can improve overall communications internally. And then we'll go into multi-site patient scheduling. So a lot of medical groups are continuing to grow and having more and more practices under that group instead of just having one single practice. So there are ways to utilize unified communications to improve patient scheduling when you have a multi-site medical group. Then we'll kind of go into a little bit about managing call spikes and different call volumes and how to handle that most effectively. And then going into some deployment options, because unified communications can be deployed in one of a few different ways, and we'll touch on that. And then at that point, we can take any questions that you may have. All right? So let's get started. So unified communications, what exactly is that? Well, there's multiple ways that any medical practice, or any business for that matter, but medical practices can communicate. Could be through voice, meaning over the phone, could be via email, instant messaging, video calls, conferencing, different types of collaboration where it could be like desktop sharing. But there's multiple ways and multiple platforms that people use. It could be the desk phone, it could be smartphones, tablets. So unified communications is really a platform that takes all these different ways that a person or a medical practice may communicate and puts them all into one platform, which is really important, especially when you have multi-sites, multiple sites, and you have, let's face it, staff and doctors and nurses that are constantly on the move and being able to communicate with them as if they were sitting in the office next to you. And that's what unified communications does. And then it does a whole lot more than that, and then allows you different ways in terms of communicating, how you can do it more efficiently, the ability to report on that, which are all ways to help you run your medical practice that much more effectively and hopefully help you reduce costs and improve profitability, as well as improve your engagement with your patients. So when we talk about the unified communications, there's really three main ways that it can help your medical practice. One, with patient engagement, how effectively and efficiently you can engage with your patients when they're calling in or setting up appointments. In addition to that, there's also staff collaboration, using unified communications to help staff collaborate much more effectively, in particular when you have multi-site locations or different people and doctors within the group that are maybe moving from one site to another or going from the site back to the hospital and back and forth. And then overall, improving the practice workflow. And again, the goal here is to make sure you can run more efficiently. It just improves the engagement with your patients, and as well as reducing costs and improving profitability. And that's what the goal is here for making that investment into unified communications. So we're going to begin here with patient engagement. How can you improve how you communicate with patients? So according to the American Journal of Medicine, missed patient appointments average about 23 to 34% for medical practices across the nation. So obviously you can imagine this lowers your potential revenue, and they put a number on it and said, well, it's about $411 per day per physician. So one of the goals with unified communications and utilizing it is you want to be able to lower that or reduce that by hopefully more than 30%. And a big part of doing that is placing these notification calls automatically instead of relying on a staff member to pick up the phone and remember to make those calls. Oftentimes, particularly in a busy practice, maybe those calls don't happen, or they don't happen on a timely fashion, or you miss them, and that can cause, obviously, patients not showing up on time. In addition to that, it does require a lot of work to have a person physically picking up the phone and making those phone calls. So what you can utilize unified communications to do is to actually have them automated. So you can have those calls go out on a schedule, and it's an automated call going out, not requiring an actual person or administrative staff to pick up the phone and make those calls. So now you can reduce the cost of having to have a person make those calls for you, and by scheduling ahead of time, you can ensure that those calls are actually going out on time when they're supposed to. And by doing this, we've seen even with our clients how that's really lowered the patient no-show percentage. And again, that just means more revenue into the medical practice. It also improves patient engagement. Not only is it going to help you reduce costs, but patients do like that. The fact that there's a variety of ways that you can automate the system to give them reminders. For instance, prescription reminders, or assisting them with completing forms by telephone prior to them coming in. So instead of having to come to the office maybe 15, 20, or 30 minutes earlier to fill out paperwork and forms, they can do that ahead of time. So by the time they show up, all the forms have been taken care of and have already been filled out, as well as responding to routine patient requests. And there's ways you can automate that, and we'll touch on a few of those a little bit later on in this presentation. But again, the overall big advantage to your patients, to your practice, is just improving that engagement, giving them, your patients, the information that they need, giving them the reminders, and automating this as much as possible, taking the burden off your staff. Another thing that we've, by investing in unified communications, is, a lot of medical practice have paid third-party SMS services that do maybe send out these text messages for patient reminders. Well, if you invest in a unified communication solution, you might be able to do that with the system that you're purchasing. Instead of having to pay a third party, you can keep all of that in-house. And in some cases, you could save quite a bit of money for your practice. In the case, an example we have here, over $3,000 a year, that's a significant savings. But instead, again, having to have disparate systems, going back to what unified communications is tying all these ways of communicating onto one platform, and being able to do this as well. It's all in ways to reduce costs for the medical practice. So to kind of summarize what we just went over in the last few slides here, is just utilizing that technology to help the practice staff, the doctors, and the patients to efficiently collaborate, to make that process go a lot easier, a lot smoother, automated, be able to provide what their patients are looking for in an automated way. And again, not having to rely on your staff to make those appointment reminders, and just utilizing the technology to do all that stuff for you and automate it and keep everything in-house. So again, lower abandonment rates and recurring notification costs is just a way to improve the medical practice communications. In addition, is just not just reducing costs, but you want to make it as easy for your patients as possible. So one way medical practices have help to improve this for patients is creating a patient portal on their website. This allows a patient to go on the website, to go into their portal, and to actually look up maybe frequently asked questions or get the information that they want instead of having to call the medical practice. A lot of times patients would rather just look on a website if they can get all that information without having to make a phone call. It's easier for them, and it reduces a lot of, again, the burden on the medical office to have to field all those questions when they can put it on a portal on their website. It makes it a lot easier for them. So unified communications is you can actually add this to a portal, adding different types of features. A couple examples of that would be a call me now feature or web chat. So some medical practices are utilizing this. So if the patient goes online and they can't get the information that they're looking for, or they have an additional question, they can request that a call comes in from the doctor's office. So when you have somebody available to make that call, they can call in and actually have it scheduled ahead of time. Or if you have the capabilities, you can even have a chat and do open up a web chat with your patient without even having to make the phone call, and do it by chat. And some bigger medical groups that we've worked with have utilized this, where sometimes a person on their administrative staff could be taking phone calls as well as chatting with other patients at the same time. This is more of a pretty busy, large medical group, but these are what other groups are doing out there to, again, reduce costs and to improve that patient engagement. Okay, so we talked a lot about now the patient engagement piece of it. Now let's talk about staff collaboration. And especially when you have multiple sites, it's important to be able to try to bring everybody together. And that's, again, the goal of unified communications, to make it, while you have people all across maybe the state or maybe in multiple states, and different members of the staff and the doctors that could be in different areas, that could be in one medical office one day, a different medical office the next day, and they're bouncing back from office to the hospital. How do you bring everybody together so they can communicate in real time, even though they're in different locations and moving around? So one of those ways is using mobility, and I touched on this in the beginning. Is mobility is one of those a great feature on unified communications platform. And really what it does is it turns your mobile device or your smart device into your telephone. And it allows you to make calls, do text message or instant message, as well as emails, but you're using it from one device. So in the example of this slide here, you may have a doctor and they're using a tablet to access the EMR records. And they can use that same tablet now to also to reach out to the nurse or to their practice staff if they need to schedule an appointment or have a follow-up, and they could do that, again, via voice, having a phone call. It could be an instant message. It could be an email. However that doctor sees fit to be able to, that they need to make that communication. Same thing with the nurse, making his or her rounds and just tying it in with the office, but now you can interact in real time. So not waiting to get back to the office and schedule these or play phone tag back and forth. You can do it, again, all in real time by using these smart devices that now go under the umbrella of how the medical group communicates. So what you find is with mobility, or usually voice calls fail about 85% of the first time in the healthcare environments. Oftentimes you make a call and you're going to leave a message and wait to get that call back if somebody's not at their desk. So by doing this and keeping it real time and be able to utilize your mobile device, no matter where you are, you can receive that call. So if you walk away from your desk, that call or that instant message can come to your smart device. If you happen to be in a meeting, maybe you can't take the call, but you can send an instant message back and forth in real time while you're doing something else. Now, another thing with mobility, which is important about it, and these mobility features you find in the major manufacturers that sell these types of products and services, is that it allows you to also use, the staff can use their own smart device. So we found medical offices where they've issued out smart devices for all their staff, or at least to the doctors. What ends up happening is that people usually like to use the smart device that they bought, because let's face it, everybody's got an iPhone or they have an Android. They have some kind of smart device that they purchase, and that's the one that they like to use and they want to use. When you issue them a smart device, so now they got to walk around with two devices that they have to use in their pockets, which typically they don't want to do, especially if the one that you're issuing them is the one that they don't want. They don't want to use, they're not comfortable with using it. Well, these mobility features becomes an app that goes on the smart device, and it can go onto the doctors or the nurses or whomever, their own personal smart device, and those calls are now separate from their personal calls. So instead of having to walk around with two smart devices, they can just bring one, the one that they bought, the one that they like to use personally, the one they feel comfortable with. And when they want to make a business call, all they have to do is open up that mobility app that's on their phone. It keeps everything separate from their personal calls and their personal text messages or whatnot. So it just keeps it separate, but allows them to utilize the device. It also saves the medical practice an enormous amount of money, because they don't have to now issue smart devices for their staff and pay the data plans that go along with it. And on top of that, which is also very important for the medical industry, is that with these devices or with this mobility feature, it's also secure. So you can, the voice and the instant message and the message that goes back and forth is encrypted, so you don't have to worry about, important patient files getting out there, somebody be able to access it. It's all encrypted in a secure environment. So again, this goes back to a great feature for people that travel a lot. So for instance, physicians are constantly on the move, going from office and they're going to the hospital. So it allows them to always be able to respond in real time, because they always have their smart device on them. What's also a great feature about this is that mobility features will also work not just on the cellular network, it will also work over the Wi-Fi network. So if you're in an area that gets bad cell phone coverage, you can use the Wi-Fi. We actually had a medical group that we work with, and they actually had pagers. That's what they use for all their doctors and staff. They need to reach a doctor, they would have to page the doctor, and the doctor would have to make a call when he or she had an opportunity to do so. So they thought, well, you know what, let's utilize this mobility feature. One of the benefits to it is that, again, they don't have to wait for a page and somebody to call them back. They can collaborate in real time. But the other big advantage to this was the fact that whenever the doctor was in the hospital got horrible, horrible cell phone coverage. They had a great Wi-Fi network, but their cellular coverage was terrible. Well, with the mobility app, when they're actually in the hospital, they can make and receive not only instant messages, but voice calls that are going over the Wi-Fi. So now they can actually utilize their smart device when they're in that hospital by utilizing the mobility app or the Wi-Fi feature of the mobility app. So again, a great, great solution for them. All right, so now we've talked about the patient engagement. We went over how staff collaborate. So let's talk about how this improves the overall practice workflow. So again, it helps with efficient patient appointment scheduling. So utilizing unified communications to automate this process, have the scheduling be an automated process, taking the human element out of it. But also for multi-site practices, what larger medical groups would do is to optimize scheduling is actually have a centralized scheduling. So if you need to make an appointment with the doctor, no matter where they are, you have one group where those calls get centralized, and those appointments can be made for any one of these offices or these office sites. That actually improves as a major cost reduction for medical groups when they centralize it, and just makes that process a lot more efficiently. And again, something you do with unified communications. And really what your result is to maximize patient volume. And that's what the goal is, how effectively you can communicate and reduce the amount of staff to be able to do the same amount of communication, but maybe with less staff, and just streamlining the process and automating as much as possible is going to really be how you're going to maximize patient volume and overall revenue and improve customer or patient satisfaction. So give you different types of opportunities for this. One way you can use unified communications is directing those calls to the appropriate staff. So when somebody calls in, you can make sure that those calls get routed to the right person. One thing we find in a lot of medical groups is a lot of times those calls come in and the customer gets put on hold and then transferred, and that call might get transferred 1, 2, sometimes even 3 times. If you can improve that process, so when that comes in and goes to the right person quickly, again, it just improves that patient engagement, and it just makes a much more efficient process. Decreasing, again, calls to a busy front office staff. If you have that calls going into the right person, it just makes it a lot better, and it helps you manage the daily spikes in call volume, where you can handle it a lot better. Maybe you might have an office where there's certain times of the day when it gets heavy volume, and you can actually have what's called like call centers or a contact center, where as those calls come in, you can bring in extra people can then receive those calls. If everybody you have there is on the phone and now you have extra volume of calls coming in, you can have those calls then get rerouted to some other people that can handle that overflow of calls, so you're not missing any calls. Another piece to all of this stuff with unified communications, I don't really have on the slide here, but which really ties all this stuff together is the ability to do the reporting on it. So again, a lot of this stuff as I'm discussing it can be be very sophisticated on how you route these calls throughout the medical group and the medical practice. Well, there's a lot of types of reporting that can come in that you can purchase that could be part of this unified communications platform, and sometimes there's also third-party products that tie into these unified communications platforms that can give you very detailed call reporting. And the purpose of the call reporting is you could really understand volume of calls and when these calls come in, and really to take a look at the week and say, okay, here's certain times of the week and certain days of the week we get enormous amount of volume, and these other times that are slower, and this is how these calls are coming in, and this is what percentage of calls have been transferred multiple times. What it does is just helps you understand how the call flow works within your business, and that's a huge benefit to that, especially in larger, more busier medical practices, is by understanding how these calls come in and the call flow works can help you make better decisions in terms of staffing. So you can ensure that you have the right staff there during heavy call volume days, and maybe reduce the staff on days where it's not so busy. So you can really streamline your business. But the call reporting and the detailed call reporting on these types of workflows becomes absolutely critical, but allows you to really understand your practice, how it operates, and then you can make better, more informed decisions on how do you staff your practice. And again, all these are ways to reduce costs and just make sure that call volume coming in from your patients is just more streamlined, more efficient. And again, I keep saying it, but better patient engagement, and it's going to help you reduce costs. So it's just a really a good way of just improving your overall practice. And the most common first impression of a practice is by a telephone conversation. I mean, I actually, just give you a personal, I had called a medical office recently. I need to make an appointment, and the person who answered the phone sounded like she didn't want to be working at her job. She clearly didn't seem like she was enjoying her work, but you know what? That comes across to me. That makes me think about how does this practice run? Is it an efficient practice? I'm talking to somebody who doesn't seem like they're happy at their job. It forms an impression. So again, if somebody calls in and they're constantly being transferred and put on hold for long periods of time, those can have negative impressions on customers. Or I should say customers, I should say patients. Your patients are your customers, but if you form that negative impression on them, they may look around and decide to go to another medical group because of any inefficiencies that they may perceive. So the better you can leave that first impression, the more efficient you can come across, just the overall better impression you're going to make on your patient. And scheduling difficulties, who we talk to, is usually a big challenge for a lot of practice, especially the busier practices. So again, the better you can improve that for your patients, the happier patients you're going to have, and the more revenue you'll be able to bring into your practice by doing that. But positive phone experiences And this is something I take to heart because we sell voice over IP phone systems. This is what our job is. But having that positive phone experience is absolutely crucial for your medical business. So to kind of summarize, you can kind of look at this slide and it gives you a whole 30,000-foot view of how these different pieces all work together within a medical practice, using these different components of unified communications. The first step is you have the doctor using the mobility app on, in this picture, on his smart device or in his tablet, being able to reach into the medical practice. On the second step there, we can have an outbound campaigns, basically automated campaigns into the unified communications system that can send out automated appointments to schedule with your patients, automating that process. Your patients then in step 3 are going to get those reminders. Again, they're automated reminders, but it's the reminders to make sure that they show up on time, come to their appointment, and patients appreciate that. And they arrive as scheduled, and now afterwards, at number 5, it gives you an example of them being on that portal. They may have questions afterwards or need to make prescription reminders or questions about that. They can go into the medical practice's patient portal for those frequently asked questions and utilize that, and gives them a way, then another way that they can reach into the medical practice if they have any other kind of questions. And just, again, improving that overall engagement with the patient. So the last piece here is then, okay, how do you deploy it? Is this a premise-based system? Is it a cloud system? Well, the answer is yes. You can deploy it in multiple ways. And there's really 3 main ways that you can deploy the solution. One would be on-site, and that would be a traditional way of purchasing the technology as a capital expenditure, and it's a technology that sits in the medical practice, in the office. It's managed by the medical group, perhaps your IT staff, and you buy it and you own the technology. Second way you can do it is by cloud, by actually putting it all into the cloud, and now instead of purchasing it as a capital expense, it becomes a recurring fee, a service, a monthly a service fee. So it goes from a capital expenditure to an operational expense or an OPEX expense, and you consume it that way. And that way you don't have to have an IT staff managing it. It's all handled in the cloud for you. But there's also a third way, and the third way is actually having a hybrid solution where you can actually mix on-site and cloud within the medical group. So an example would be that is, we have a medical group where their main medical office is a few hundred staff. It's a very large group, and that's where the main office is, and they have and that's a site where they've decided they want to put an on-site solution there. They have an IT staff on hand. They're going to own that type of technology. But then they have multiple small doctors' offices that only have a handful of phones, and for them, it doesn't make a lot of sense for them to put on-site equipment in all those sites if they only have a few phones in each one of those sites. So each one of those offices now can go with a with a cloud solution. So they're just going to have Deploy Cloud is just a monthly fee that they know they got to pay every single month. It's pretty much the same number coming in every month, and they use that for those other sites, the smaller sites all around. But then they have an on-site solution at the main site, but they all interact as if it's one platform. It's one phone system, all tied together. And from the user's perspective, it doesn't make a difference whether in an office that's using the cloud, using as a cloud service, or if they're in the main office and on-site, the user experience is exactly the same. The only difference is about how it's managed on the back end and how it's purchased, basically. And that gives you the best of both worlds if you go with the hybrid solution. So any one of these deployment models will give you what you need. It's just really how the medical practice wants to handle it based off of their resources and, quite frankly, how they want to purchase it, whether it's going to be an OPEX or a CAPEX expense. So to summarize the overall benefits of unified communications, one, again, is it helps the practice maximize patient volume. You're going to reduce those no-shows. You can make sure that you're getting those reminders out to your patients. You automate the system, centralizing billing or centralizing the phone calls, whether it's for billing or scheduling, just helps you to streamline that process and maximize your patient volume. It helps patients be more engaged with their care. You give them different ways that they can call in and get the information that they need. It might be by speaking to somebody, but it might be having through an automated message or automated teleprompt over the phone or through the patient portal. But it gives them different ways that they can get the information that they want and just improves that overall engagement. Revenue increases as no-shows decrease. So the better you can improve your no-show ratio or lower that number, the more revenue you're going to make as a practice. And that's obviously one of the main goals that you're looking to do. And all this stuff is HIPAA compliant, whether it's calls, instant messaging, using mobility. It's all on a secure HIPAA compliant platform, so you don't have to worry about any kind of security issues. And these are predictable, repeatable telephony rollouts. By using one solution instead of disparate solutions over multiple locations, you have everything on one platform, whether it's going to be a premise-based system that you're going to roll out or on-site to all these new offices that maybe as the medical practice grows. It's easy to do that if it's going to be on-site, and it's also easy to do that if you're going to have cloud. But keeping everybody on one platform, make sure that these rollouts are very predictable, repeatable, and very easy and cost-effective. So that concludes the webinar. So if you have any more questions, feel free to give me a call. Again, my name is Paul Jenny. That's our phone number and my phone number and extension right there, or you can send me an email. Again, we're Eastern Datacom, and that's our website. You can go on our website. We have more information, a number of case studies there as well, to give you an idea what other medical practices are doing.
Okay, Paul, we actually have a couple questions to start with.
Great.
If you're using a web chat, how is the HIPAA compliant on their end?
How is the HIPAA compliant on their end? That, honestly, I don't, that's a good question. I actually would have to get one of my engineers on that. I'm not 100% sure. I don't want to lead you the wrong way. That's actually a very good question.
He's asking for the patient.
What would be the best way to get that information out, to get an answer to that?
If you can send the answer to me, I can send the answer out to all participants from today.
Perfect. I'll get back to you on that one. That's a very good. You stumped me on the first one. I'm not off to a good start here.
Okay, let me move on to the next one. How do you encourage patients to use IM or to receive communications via text or emails?
Well, the patients wouldn't really text unless it was on the online chat. But most of those texting features, like I mentioned with mobility, that's really internal collaboration within the doctors and the nurses and the internal staff. When it comes to patients, it's usually by phone. You can have automated reminders that go out by phone, as well as when they call in. You can actually have different types of prompts that they go to. One way could be you could have them give some information. They can receive an auto attendant. They type in certain information, which then we could lead them to to the right person internally at the medical office. The only type of chat that we would see would be the web-based chat, not necessarily a text message. Does that answer the question?
Yeah, let me move on to the next one. Okay. If you use the mobility app, would our office phone number show up if a provider calls them, or would it be a blocked number?
Great question. Actually, that number would be whatever you like it to be. Typically, it's going to be the medical practice. So when you call, that's actually, I'm glad you brought that up. So when those calls go out and you open up the mobility app, it comes out as, whatever that medical practice, whatever you want it to say, as opposed to it doesn't show up your personal cell phone. So it gives you the opportunity that if you are not at your desk, you can call a patient, and from the patient's perspective, you're sitting at your desk phone, because that's all the information. They're getting just the name of the medical group or whatever name that you want them to see. not your personal cell phone.
Okay, great. I have a couple questions regarding receiving the presentation. Yes, the presentation will be emailed to all participants today. Also, the recorded version will be up on our website later today or tomorrow at the latest. If we have no other questions, I'm going to close the webinar down. Thank you all for attending, and remember, you can touch base with the presenter directly today if you have any additional questions. Thank you so much for attending, and have a great day.